Now everybody's going D2C. Let's go D2C because we go direct to consumer. We got these fat margins and big business from the beginning. We can control everything. We can, have direct communication with the customer, big money in the bank. But it's not actually like that. And I find it extremely interesting now that your new ventures are starting and you're basing it on retail and that type of distribution. Talk to
Yeah.
me a little bit about that.
Oh, it's a really good topic because I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and it varies by market as well. And it varies by scale of business. So I
So
deal
let's just
with,
focus on apparel since our listeners are
yeah,
mainly
yeah,
in
yeah.
apparel, but just so, kind of have a, yeah.
No, but I mean, so I'm going to make a really sweeping statement right now and
Go
say,
ahead.
don't start a D2C business right now.
Oh.
Um, unless you have $1 million in the bank to basically throw into marketing. It's we always start faction. When a faction started, we tried to go D2C. We wanted to go D2C. A load of other people around me kind of started D2C businesses as well. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you had the money, you could kind of do it. But in the last, iOS 14 updates, all that stuff, it's made the cost of acquisition so much higher. It's made the competition so much more expensive. So if you're doing Google ads, Google shopping, Google search, the cost of acquisition is so much higher than it was. If you only have a little bit of money to start a business right now, it's you have to create so much content to actually kind of break through all the noise. You have to put so much into marketing that I'm looking at businesses and with Otherwild assessing these businesses, people are throwing 50% of their revenue budget into marketing, because that's what you have to do if you're going to start a D2C brand, unless you already are at the 5-10 million stage and you have $1 million marketing budget. it, that will be fine. I know this sounds really counterintuitive, but when you're big and you have momentum and you have enough money to throw at something, the wheel turns a lot quicker and a lot easier than it does when you only have a little bit of money. And you have to do everything yourself, So what I would recommend, if you're starting a small business now, there are also a lot of other opportunities out there that there weren't 10 years ago. Fair, Anchor, Fairling. There are ways that you can use marketplaces, B2B marketplaces as well, which are online, where you can actually get your product into retail, or you can use marketplaces which sell multiple brands online and then you deliver, if you see what I mean. I'm not sure if this is getting too technical or not
Go
technical enough,
ahead.
but
This is what this podcast is about. It's about getting tactical,
great.
giving people tangible advice, not just fluffy, cute words.
Yeah. No,
So
I
go
mean,
on. The more tactical, the better.
cool. Because if you only have a small amount of budget, sitting there and kind of go, well, I can build a Shopify site, I can use a template, and my God, e-commerce now is so much easier than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were throwing 100 grand pounds at an agency in London to build us an e-commerce site, which only half worked. And you'd have a 5 grand a month management fee. Now, Shopify, $20 a month, choose a template for $200. You could do multiple currencies, multiple languages, everything. It is amazing. But just having a website up there doesn't sell product. That's like the last step of everything. You have to find ways to get your product and your brand out there. And if you have those networks, I mean, I'm fairly lucky. I know that I can call someone in PR and 10 different magazines in Europe, North America, Australasia, London, and I know the editors, and I can get on the phone with the PR person and go, can you get me into this magazine, this magazine, this magazine? And I've known them long enough, and I've got those relationships that it's fairly straightforward. But if you're doing that from nothing, you've got to pay for all of that. And for someone to actually purchase a product, they need to be aware of it. They need to trust it. They need to see it again and again. I mean, there's some statistic about having to see a brand 7 times before you purchase, or having 7 touch points to a brand before you purchase. And for a small business, if you're just trying to design a product and get a product made, that is hard enough. To then go and actually have to produce content every day, put that out on TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. It's such a challenging task. And then you end up going, well, I've got to do this. So I'll go and employ someone to copyright for me. Or I'll employ a photographer, and then I'll employ this person. And in the end, it still doesn't give any guaranteed cash flow. And what you need as a small business is access to capital to fund inventory generally. So trying to do that by yourself. And there are a lot of companies, I've been looking into a lot of companies lately who claim to give inventory financing on good terms for D2C only businesses. But in all the ones I've looked into, there are cliffs. So what I mean is they'll say, oh yeah, you can pay for 6 months. And then at the end of the 6 months, you've got to pay 80% of the original loan back. And if you're borrowing 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand, and you suddenly have a cliff after 6 months where you've just paid 200 bucks a week, a month or whatever, and then suddenly you owe 8 grand, that doesn't work in a business that needs sustainable cash flow. So one of the things about actually talking to retailers direct, and it can be any retailer, if you're starting a t-shirt brand or you're starting an outerwear brand and there's a clothes store in your town, or I'm talking about wherever you are, literally start talking to retailers, because they will give you honest feedback. They will talk to you about the quality, the positioning, the price point, whether there's a market or not. And you need to know whether there's a market, because as soon as you get orders from retailers, for example, you can take that to a bank, or you can take that to private investment, and you can say, I've got this order, but I need 10 grand to cover it. Can you give me a loan for 10 grand? You'll get your money back at that date when that person receives it, and everybody's happy. And really, if you're trying to bootstrap, for me, that's the only way I know to grow a business, is having access to capital that doesn't take equity, that you're not saying, oh, I need 10 grand to pay for, 1,000 t-shirts. Shit, I'm going to have to give away 20% of my business. Like, no, you don't want to give away your business. You don't want to give away equity for inventory financing ever, basically.
This was such fantastic advice. It's a little bit controversial, because this is not exactly what you hear out there. And I love that it's like that. And I love that you're backing it up with facts and that, you're talking to a lot of shop owners, and you know what they want. And so you just have to kind of, again, reverse engineer instead of creating something and putting it out there and hoping people might like it. And then you've wasted all your savings. You've got other people's money. You've invested it as well. And you don't know if it's going to fly or not.
Well, I've lived through that stage about where D2C first started, brands were like, exactly, just said, oh my God, I can take all the margin. I can go direct to a customer. So the customer comes to me and I get their loyalty and I get their interaction, and they'll buy from me again. And the brands are all like, yeah, fuck you, stores. Sorry for my language. But, and you're like, but I like stores. I like browsing in stores. And when you come from a small town like Verbier, for example, or any ski resort, the retailer is really the heart and soul of the town. You go into them every couple of weeks, you service your skis, you get something fixed, you need a pair of goggles. Like your friends are the people who run these stores. And if those stores don't exist, there's kind of nothing else, I know that sounds strange, but and I order from Zalando. God damn, I can order 3 things from Zalando. They're here tomorrow. I pick one of them I like. I send the other 2 back, and that is horrendous as a consumer and as for sustainability, etc. But for some things, that's good. But for me, for outdoor brands, action sports brands, and even fashion as well, and mainstream high street kind of brands, having relationships with retail is really important, because they're stable. They've been there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They know what's happening. They see trends. The more you work with them, the better. And there was massive, what we call channel conflict. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a thing called Shopatron in the States, which basically tried to let you kind of like click and collect. You would order your product online, and then if a store in the region where that customer was had that product, they would get the opportunity to deliver it. And it was so complex, and we tried to use it, but it was amazingly complex. But there was a time when retailers would literally go, are you selling online? And you'd say yes, and they go, well, we don't want to talk to you. And that was 10 years ago. But now retailers still want to know, well, are you selling online? And they're kind of like, okay, you're selling online, we get it. But you can respect that relationship. You can say, okay, well, we're not going to do clearances or discounts before, for example, in winter sports, we're not going to do discounts until after February 1st, because the retailer who has pre-ordered your product and only gets it in December only has 2 months to sell the product. So if you're getting the product online in August and discounting it in November, you've basically screwed over all your retailers, and the retailers will never reorder from you again. And it's not that complex, it's basic respect for each stage in that sales chain, and basic respect for the fact that retailers ordered from you, they need the opportunity to sell the product. Just hold your price for until they want a discount.
How are you
They've taken a
approaching
risk.
how are you approaching your collections? Are you approaching the collection like one collection, the same collection is sold online, the same collection goes to the retailers,
Yep.
or are you experimenting? What are your tips there? Is it good to have certain things exclusive for retail so it attracts that customer, and something exclusive only for you? Would you experiment? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, if we're talking about outerwear specifically, the lead times for production are so much, the brand has to take a risk on what they order before they have retail orders. So I think what tends to happen is, I mean, some brands do things where they'll have a product that they just make. Maybe they use leftover fabrics, or maybe they do a little capsule that they just want to have for themselves. Or we used to do collabs between the skis. We had a collab with Dragon, the goggle brand. So we had a little capsule collection that we'd sell D2C, they'd sell D2C, and that kind of stuff's cool. That kind of stuff's fun. But what you tend to find now is it's getting really dangerous for brands. Um, because especially in the last couple of years, and you would have seen this, COVID, supply chains, all that, it's pushing lead times so long that you have to order fabric in, we had to do a pre-order for fabric in October or something, and normally it's December. And then you have to place your first PO for production in December. And you're like, well, the retailers haven't even seen it yet. They're not going to place an order to February. So you're ordering blind. And different brands are doing different things. Some brands are pressuring retailers into ordering before they've even opened their stores for the following winter, which is kind of horrendous. But big brands can afford to do that. Patagonia, North Face, etc., can afford to push their retailers into that. Whereas small brands have to take a risk. And I think that's what you find. You always tend to find that you do a sample run, you have a line plan, you do a sample run, you do X amount of colors, and by the time it actually goes to the retailers and you get pre-orders, you've chopped one style and you've chopped two colors because for some reason no one liked them. And that's just it. And I think what you're finding now is that brands have to take that risk. So if they believe in a color or something and it doesn't sell through, they don't get pre-orders from retailers, then you end up selling it online. And there's ways you can work around that. You can say it's a limited edition colorway, or it's a special colorway, or it's, just something for us. And then the fact that the retailers didn't like it, I mean, we still like it. There's still customers out there that you can reach. But again, as long as you're respecting that relationship and you're not trying to undercut what a retailer does and what a retailer is special for. I mean, I think a lot of people also don't understand how to build brands through retailers. A lot of people just give the brand to the retailers, they
Yeah.
pre-order it, and then they leave it.
Yeah.
And they don't actually understand that they need to be going in there and visiting. They need to be seeing how sell-through is going. They need to be looking at what opportunities there are for windows. I mean,
Yeah.
what you can do to train your staff, what you can do to incentivize the staff. There's a lot you can do with retail that in this industry, it feels like a lot of people aren't doing. And a lot of the retailers are open and saying they're not getting the support from brands, which you just would automatically think that they would get. I don't know, but that's my, I guess, my experience.